Like me, this story. This story is Puss in Boot. A miller had three sons, and on his deathbed there is the picture of him and the lion, the puss and the lion. And there is their picture too. Here was a picture of the story of Puss in Boots, and the top we see the clever cat receiving the boots from the miller's son, catching a rabbit, which ability they want. Yeah. That's the picture of the lion who will post. That's the lion, and that's the picture of the lion and the post. That's the story. The lion, a miller and three sons, and on his deathbed he left his mill to the oldest son, his ass to the next, and his cat to the youngest. The youngest son was at first disappointed with his share to his father's property, but the cat said to him, "My dear master, buy me a pair of boots and a sack, and I will soon show that I am more useful than a miller or an ass." So the youngest son spent all his money in buying his cat a handsome pair of boots and a sack. Did I go? So he went. The youngest son spent all his money in buying his cat a handsome pair of boots and a sack. The cat put on the boots and then slung the sack on his shoulder and went to a warren. There he opened the sack, put some bran in it, and lay down as if he were dead. A rabbit smelled the bran and ran into the sack. The cat at once caught the rabbit and killed it and took it to the king and said, "This is Easter is coming up now. Since the noble Marquis of Carabas desires me to bring you this rabbit boiled with onion, you'll find it makes an excellent dish." "Rabbit? Yes." My answer to you. Question me who? He's asking the king. There is the picture. The king is sitting in the picture here. Hey. And there is the lion and the puss. Which one is it, the puss? And the cat put on the puss and then slung the sack on his shoulder and went to war. There he opened the sack, put some bran in it, and lay down as if he were dead. Rabbit smelled the bran and ran into the sack. The cat at once caught the rabbit and killed it, and took it to the king and said, "Sir, the noble Marquis of Carabas desired me to bring you this rabbit boiled with onions. You will find it makes an excellent dish." "Rabbit, you said," the king. "Of course, how delightful. I love rabbit, but my cook can never catch any." "Pray, you caught a prey?" "Of course, I caught you rabbit, king of Carabas." "Oh." And then the next morning the cat caught two partridge and brought them to the king as a present from the Marquis of Carabas. The king was so pleased that he at once called for his royal carriage to take him and his daughter, the princess, on a visit. I have the pictures here in the book. To the neighbor who had sent him such fine gifts. The cat hastened him back to the youngest son and said to him, "Come with me at once. I will show you a place in the river where you can have a good bathe." The cat took him to a spot where the royal carriage was about to pass, and told him to undress and hide his clothes under a stone and get into the water. He had just entered the river when the king and the princess drove by. "Help! Help!" shouted the cat. "What happened? What happened? What's the matter?" said the king. "Some thieves have stolen the clothes of the noble Marquis of Carabas, said the cat. My master is in the water, and if he stays there much longer, he will certainly get the cramp. The king ordered his attendant to run to the palace and bring the finest suit of clothes they could find. They returned with a gorgeous dress which the king had made when he went courting. The younger son put it on, and he looked so handsome in it that the princess fell in love with him. As soon as he entered the royal carriage, the king was also touched, and he whispered to his daughter, That's just how I looked 20 years ago when I went courting. The cat was delighted at the success of his shame and running on in front of the royal carriage. He came to some wheat fields and meadows and said to the peasant there, The king is coming, and unless you tell him that these wheat fields, the meadows, belong to the noble Marquis of Carabas, you will be chopped into mincemeat. So when the king passed by and asked them to whom the wheat field and meadows belonged, they said, For the noble Marquis of Carabas. Dear me, said the king to the youngest son, what a fine state, and the music sang. You have. The youngest son smiled in a bewildered way, and the king said in a whisper to the princess, I was just bewildered when I went courting. The cat still ran on in front of the royal carriage and passed through a forest and came to a magnificent palace. In the palace lived an ogre to whom the wheat field and the meadows really belonged. And the cat at once called upon the ogre and said to him, My dear ogre, what should wonderful tales everybody tells about you? Is it true that you can change yourself into any shape that you please? It is quite true, said the ogre. And he at once changed himself into a lion. That's nothing, said the cat. Anybody can puff himself up into something bigger than he really is. But it is only the wise who can make themselves appear smaller than they indeed are. Can you turn yourself into a mouse, for instance? Of course, it's just as easy, said the ogre. He then changed himself into a mouse, and the cat passed him and gobbled up him and ran down and opened the gate just as the carriage arrived. Welcome, sir, to the palace of the Marquis of Carabas, said the cat. Dear me, said the king to the youngest son, what a fine palace you have. Kindly help the princess to alight. The youngest son shyly offered his arm to the princess, and the king then said to her in a whisper, I was just as shy when I went courting. In the meanwhile, the cat whisked into the kitchen and ordered a grand lunch and got all the choicest wine out of the cellar. And by the time that the king and the princess and the youngest son were seated at the table, the repast was ready. After making a very enjoyable meal, the king turned to the youngest son and said, You are just as bashful as I was when I went courting, but I can see you are as deeply in love with the princess as she is with you. Why don't you propose to her? The youngest son then asked the princess to be his wife, and she consented, and in a short time they were married in great state. The cat came to the marriage feast in a new pair of boots with crimson leather tops and set with 2 rows of very finest diamond. Really? Oh, the fairies and the hunchbacks. Every Irishman from Bunclody to Scarty knows of the fairy fort between Tambrick and Munfin. In appearance, it is only a level field encircled by a high mound. But Patsy Blake, a poor little hunchback, who had been turned out of house and home by his landlord, fell asleep there one moonlight night and was suddenly awakened by the sound of sweet music. Very delightful. He saw a light streaming from a doorway in the mound, and entered and crept along into a beautiful palace under the earth. Thousands of lights hung from the roof, and hundreds of pretty fairies in green coats and green gowns, with red caps on their heads, danced on the polished floor. As they danced, they sang over Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday. And you suppose you made it run like this. Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Then Thursday, Friday, Thursday, Friday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, Sabbath day. And then the morning is Sunday. The fairies at once took it up and made the palace ring with the new song, and their leader said to Patsy, "That is a grand improvement. Now, if there is anything we can do for you, say the word, and it shall be done. If you kindly take the hump of my back," said Patsy, "you would make me the happiest man in Ireland." The fairies not only took his hump away, but they brought out a sack of gold, and Patsy filled his pockets with half of it, and left the rest. The hunchback teaches the fairies a new song. In the morning, he hurried to his landlord and paid his rent and recovered possession of his farm. The landlord was also a hunchback, but he was a hard, miserable little man, and the big man he was hunchback. He was a kind of middle. He's a middle, not tall, in the middle. "You are looking well, Patsy," he said. "Where did you get your money?" And all the fairies around him, some with hats, one did it like a scarf, not a scarf, like they wrap it around their heads. Some pulled hats, some fairies with wings, some fairies like a butterfly, some with wings like a hummingbird, some with wings like different things. Patsy told him about the fairy palace. The next night, Mickey went there to see if he could get something from the fairies. As soon as the doorway opened, he tramped into the palace and shouted to the dancers. So they gathered in anger about Mickey, and their leader said in a threatening tone, "What did you come here for? To get what Patsy left behind?" said Mickey, thinking of the half sack of gold. "Then you shall indeed get what Patsy left behind," said the fairy. Then, taking Patsy's hump out of a bag, he put it on Mickey, and from that time the miserly old landlord had two humps between his shoulders instead of one, and so he was punished for his avarice and for trying to deceive the fairies. They all looked nice, the fairies. One long hair, one with black hats like stripes, white and black, and one with white and black, and one with long hair, many long hairs and short hairs, and long dresses, nice one to the knee, and some with the short knee dresses like ruffled, and some with long white and green and dotted. And the man, he had a hat on and a jacket, long one, and his pants was tight from the bottom, and he had like old shoes. And that's all the story of the fairies and the hunchbacks. The old woman and Brighton. A doctor named Richard Russell, who lived at Lewis, wrote a book in 1750 to tell people that sea bathing was good for health, and he opened a house at Brighton to receive patients. One of the men to go to Brighton was the Prince Regent, who afterward became George IV. He built a great house there called the Pavilion, which is still to be seen. He used to drive down from London, taking with him fashionable and gay people from town. Brighton became all the rage. Had a tomorrow. Bye. Good night.